Okay, we've been studying in the book of Esther. Guess I need to make sure it's somebody recording. Okay, studying the book of Esther. So if you'll turn in the book of Esther with me in your Old Testament. We've been doing a series on this for a little while. I looked at this the other day and realized we're going to be done with Esther just pretty quick. So kind of sad about that. Don't lie because you're in church, and that would be bad, but has anybody actually enjoyed the book of Esther at all? Learned stuff you didn't know before? A little bit of an overview for you, starting back in chapter 1. We answered questions, and one of the questions was, where is God when evil kings rule? Talked about King Xerxes. Second, then we went on, where is God when God's people do not obey? We answered the question, where is God when evil men scheme? There was an evil guy named Haman that was introduced into the story. And the whole book of Esther is set up to be like a melodrama. And it's read every year still in the Jewish culture. And the kids go, Haman is named Haman. And then all the kids go, boo. And then Esther is like, yay, right? Or no, I missed it again. Yeah, Esther's like, okay. And then you get to Mordecai, and they probably cheer him on. I only get a couple more weeks to use this thing. This is actually called a Purim grogger. And so this is one of those things where when Haman is mentioned, they go like Sabu, and they make all this kind of... Wouldn't that be fun? I mean, if you have that every year, and I think I would look forward to it. And actually, I read this week, the kids actually, and also the adults, they dress up in costumes. So it's really kind of a neat time. It's kind of like our time during Halloween. So then we went on and we talked about where is God when we have to do hard things. Today, we're going to kind of continue the idea is where is God when evil men seem to win? We live in a culture where sometimes we look around and we can be devastated by watching evil men win. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass these notes out. If I can get you to hit one side and you on the other. Just pass them out down the middle, fly them down the way. There are notes for the sermon coming up. So just be prepared. If you can just take one per family, that would be great. But here's an outline of our chapter 6 that we're going to be in today. So if you turn to chapter 6, we're at the point now in the book of Esther where some things are going on. Haman has gone before the king in chapter 3, and he's requested that all of the Jews of the land be murdered. All of the Jews of the land be taken out. And so the king, because he doesn't think all that well, he went ahead and did that. Let Haman write a letter to be able to have that happen. And so then Esther comes on the scene again, and she goes before the king, and she says, I have a plan, I have a scheme here. I would like to invite you to come to a party with me where I'm going to feed you, and I would like to invite Haman, the evil Haman. And so Haman, he gets really excited. This is chapter 4 about coming to or in chapter 5 where he gets real excited about coming to this thing. And we left off last week in verse number, chapter 5, verse number, 14. And he had gone home, and he told his family, man, this is really exciting. I was invited to go to one of Esther's feasts. But there's a problem. I got to be invited to go to Esther's feast, but that Mordecai still doesn't bow to me. And so he's up and down and up and down. And this guy is like one of the guys who probably is not very stable. So today we're going to pick it up in chapter 6. Here's an outline. The king's distinction, verses 1 through 5. The Haman's decision in 6 through 9. The king's decree in verses 10 through 11. And then finally, Haman disgruntled again in the last part of the chapter. Pick it up in verse number 1, if you would, with me. On that night, the king could not sleep. And he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold and who sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Well, if you go back into chapter 2, we read at the very last part of chapter 2 that Mordecai had foiled a plan. That two guys were going to take over King Xerxes, King Ahasuerus, and Mordecai heard about it, and he walked in and he foiled the whole entire thing. And so he's picking up on this now, and Xerxes can't sleep at night. He's reading about this incident, and he goes, hey, what happened to the guy that saved my life? And so he's asking this question. The king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young men who attended him said, nothing has been done for him, Mordecai. And the king said, who is in the court? And just so happens that at that very moment, when King Xerxes is not sleeping, he just so happened, oh by coincidence, that he asked the question, what's been done for Mordecai? And he goes, hey, I hear somebody in the courtyard. Who happens to be walking in the courtyard but? Oh, you guys can do better than that. Who's walking? Boo, yeah, Haman's walking in the courtyard. So I'm sure this is going to end well, right? Haman had just entered in the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows. What a coincidence. I was just talking about Mordecai, and you're coming to have him hung. That's just wonderful, right? So notice what's going on. In the king's mind, he wants him exalted, but yet, you know what? Haman wants him exalted too, only on a stake, right? And the king's young men told him, Haman is there standing in the court, and the king said, hey, let him come in. Now, let's just talk about something for a little while. We're going to take a break in the midst of the sermon right off the bat. I would like to talk about luck. And I don't mean Andrew, the quarterback. I mean luck. The idea that we have lucky luck, right? Hey, maybe if we win the lottery, we'll be lucky. Okay, in God's universe, there is no such thing as luck. There is no such thing as chance. It just does not exist. So what I would like to do with you at my church family is I would like to walk you through a very special Bible study just today on God's sovereignty and His providence. So here we go. These are the papers you have in front of you. What is sovereignty? Man, I think I like that TV up there. Maybe I can turn around and look at it. What is sovereignty? Sovereignty is this: God's dominion being total. He wills as He chooses, and He carries out all that He wills. None can stay His hand or thwart His plans. Now, just because I want to make sure you're paying attention, read it with me. That big old bold face at the bottom. It is God's dominion is total. He wills as He chooses, carries out all that He wills, and none can stay His hand or thwart His plans. I think that's a good Bible definition of God and what He does. Nobody can mess it up, not even Haman, not you, not me, not any president, not any king. Nobody can mess up God's plan for the universe. Yay, God. Amen. Now, if you don't believe this, good luck. If you don't believe this, have fun waking up tomorrow morning. Because what you're going to do in your mind is you're going to try to balance all the cosmos and universe in your little mind of how good and evil happen. And, oh, what about this? Whatever are we going to do? That's the way you're going to wake up in the morning. But if you believe this, you can go to bed tonight knowing God's in control and wake up tomorrow morning and guess what you're going to be thinking? God's in control. Okay. I was going to do all these verses to prove the fact God is in control, but you can study Him for yourself. Because as I was saying earlier, check this out. If you want a little thing to do, get a brand new Bible and get a brand new purple pen. Go through from Genesis to Revelation and underline every single verse that has to do with God being in control. Guess what color your Bible's going to be? Purple. Because come to find out, He is. Click. What is He in control of? The Bible clearly teaches God's providential control. Now watch this. We're going to do like 9 of them, so get ready. He is in control over the universe at large. Let's go to Daniel, this little book that we've been studying on Tuesday nights. By the way, who comes to Tuesday nights? Do you like it? Yeah. I'm so glad. Invite somebody who didn't raise their hand. Let them know they're missing something. God is in control over everything in the universe. Daniel chapter 4. Who is speaking at the end of Daniel chapter 4? Well, it's this evil king named Nebuchadnezzar, who, and we just studied this chapter this last week, who God turned into an animal and insane, and he crawled around for 7 years outside, and this was his conclusion at the end of that 7 years. Look at verse 34. At the end of days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven. My reason returned to me. I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him forever. And this is what I said. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? God is in control of everything in the universe. Do you agree? There it is. Daniel chapter 4. Number 2. He is sovereign or providential over the physical world. Let's go back to the book of Psalms. This is going to be fun. Your fingers are going to be tired today. So let's go back to the book of Psalms. Psalm 104. Going to roll through these as much as possible. Psalm 104, verse number 14. Is God in control of the physical world? Psalm 104, verse 14 says, you cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth. Who causes it to grow? God does. I had somebody actually tell me one time, oh, God's not in control of the weather. He just set it out into order and it just works itself out. Really? That's not what the Bible teaches, right? Number 3. He is in control over the brute creation. Stay there in Psalm 104. Go to verse number 21. The young lions roar for their prey, seeking their food from who? God. Come to find out, God's in control of lions. Woohoo! Right? Let's keep this train rolling. Let's go to number 4. What else is God in control over? He's over the affairs of nations. Look, as you're in Psalms, let's go back to Psalm 22. Isn't this fun? All 3 of you? Psalm 22. Psalm 22, verse 28. Is this fun for the rest of you? Okay, I'm glad. Psalm 22, verse 28. For kingship belongs to the, and he rules over the nations. Who's in control of the nations? Oh, but if, you know what? That includes every nation on the planet except for the United States. He's not in control of the United States. Therefore, we all should worry about who the president is. We should all worry about politics. We should all worry about ISIS. We should all worry about the Muslims. We should all worry because apparently God's not in control. Psalm 22. He rules over the nations. There's a lot of us peeps that ought to go get that tattooed somewhere. Yes? So that we don't worry. Number 5. He rules over man's birth and his lot in life. Since you're in the book of Psalm, let's just stay there. Let's go to Psalm 139. Psalm 139, verse 16. Verse 16. David says, for your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. God wrote your days down before you were born. Let me show you another one. This one isn't even up there. I'm just going to add this one. Go to the book of Job in front of Psalms. Man, it's been a long time since we've flipped through our Bibles this much. We usually just stay in one place. Go to the book of Job, and let's go to Job chapter 12. A few years back, I was out at the golf course, because that's where all godly people should be in the summertime. And a lady came in, and she had just gone through a very tragic thing in her life. Her husband had died. And she came in, and it was very hard for her to express what she was needing to say. And so the golf pro was there, and he's like, I don't know what to do. And so I kind of took over from there, and I said, how can I help you? She said, well, my husband just died, and I don't know what to do. and we would like to have a memorial service out here. And so I put her in my van, and we drove down to the end of the golf course where they have a gazebo, and I showed her all that stuff. And she came back, and she found out I was a pastor, and so she starts asking some very hard questions. Why did this happen? Why? Why is it that I'm a young wife, I still have kids here, why did this happen? I said, well, honey, I don't know why it happened, but I can tell you some things for sure. I reached down, I grabbed my Bible, and I picked it up, and I read her this verse right here, Job chapter 12, verse 7. Actually, just go to verse 9. Now let's go to verse 7. But ask the beasts, and they will teach you, the birds of the heavens, and they will tell you, or the bushes of the earth, they'll teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In His hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. You want to know why you just took the breath you did? Because He made you do it. And the second that He doesn't want you to breathe anymore, you won't. There is not a person on this earth, ever, past, present, or future, that has ever lived one day more or one day less than God had intended them to live, even the youngsters who've died. That makes me go to bed at night and go, I don't understand it, but I'm awful glad you're in control. Yes? Number 6, He's over the outward success and failures of men's lives. We're not going to take time to go through all this. Number 7, He's over everything. He's providential over things seemingly accidental or insignificant. I am going to do this one. Go to the book of Isaiah. Which chapter should I ask those people who have already been through this 900 times? Which one? Isaiah 45. What about all the evil, Pastor Hod? What about all those evil things that happen in the world? Surely God would never do anything as such to make evil happen. He would never do that because He's a holy God and He doesn't mess Himself with things that aren't holy. But wait, is God not in control of even evil? If God isn't in control of evil, then that puts evil on an equal plane with God. Are y'all following me? He's in control of even evil, and here's a verse you can tattoo for yourself. Here we go. Isaiah 45, verse 5. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God. I equip you, though you do not know me, that people may know from the rising of the sun and from the west, that there is none besides me. I am the Lord, there is no other. Listen carefully. I form light, and I create darkness. I make well-being, and I create what? Calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. Now, you can argue with me all you want that God doesn't do that kind of stuff, but that argument's going to go real short, real quick. Who you need to argue with is Him. Because He just said, I'm the one that does that. Whether it's a tsunami, airplanes flying into buildings, or whatnot, our God is in control of that stuff. And we don't need to worry about that. He is in control. Now, though it doesn't explain the evil, it explains that, you know, one thing is great about that. Evil will never exceed where God wants it to be. And He uses it for Himself. Come on now. Is it good to be on the good side? Yes. You got a choice. You can either have a great, big, huge God who's in control of everything, or have a little tiny God that you can fit in your pocket and take Him out anytime you want. The God of the Bible is in control of everything. Even a king not sleeping in Esther, reading a story about Mordecai, and it just so happens, lucky him, Haman walks in. Is God in control? Okay, go back to Esther. You guys can study the rest of this all by yourself. Go back to the book of Esther. Chapter 6. Before we go on in the text itself, I just want you to look at 2 more slides. You ready? The doctrine of providence teaches Christians that they are never in the grip of blind forces. Isn't that lovely? We are never in the grip of blind forces. We're never in the grip of the Muslims. We're never in the grip of an evil Democrats. We're never in the grip of anything other than God Himself. To God be the glory? Amen. Come on now. Yes or no? Amen. All that happens to them is divinely planned, including if they get burned at the stake. In the first century, there were Christians, day in and day out, that were getting pulled out of their homes, that were getting burned at the stake. And those Christians knew that God was in control, knew He was providential. They actually, the gall of these Christians, actually believed that there was going to be a heaven right after that. Amen. And so they said, light the fire, let's get this going. And they sang hymns because they believed God was in control. And it was divinely planned that they would die the death that they were dying. Each event comes as a new summons for us to trust, obey, rejoice, knowing that all is for one's spiritual and eternal good. Why would God have me burned at the stake? Apparently it's for His glory and my good. Light the flame. Let's go. I'm going to argue something that I've been bringing up ever since we started Esther. He is here and He is not silent. You can study Esther all you want. You're never going to find the name of God. But He doesn't have to be named to be present. Right? So we go on and we look and see how Haman responds to this in verse number 6. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, verse number 6, "What should be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?" And Haman said to himself, what a sinner he is, right? He talks to himself. I'm sure there's nobody in here that does this. What should be done for the man to whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, who would the king delight to honor more than me? You know who that reminds me of, by the way? Have anybody ever watched Andy Griffith? You remember Barney? Yeah, well, Andy. You know how he does? I can just see Haman pulling up his man. Who would the king like to honor more than me? Right? Sorry. That's just what I was thinking. All right, so a lot of you are going to go home and go, I'm never going to that church again. There's things I can't unsee. And that's one of those things. All right, so anyway. So Haman said to himself, oh, Lord, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. Notice what he's saying. What should be done for a guy who does that? He should be equal with the king. That's lofty. I'd settle for like $100. But he's wanting the kingdom. Kind of shows you his position. Let the robes of the horse be handed, and the horse be handed over to the one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let him lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, pause. Why did Haman, notice too, the king was not sleeping well, right? And so he opened a book and he started reading. Did you notice who else wasn't sleeping? Haman. He comes walking into the courtyard. Do you know why he came walking into the courtyard? Anybody read through that at all? Does anybody know why? He was mad. He was really mad. Because he was coming in to really get Mordecai. So watch this. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse as you have said, and do so too. We'll pick it up next week. I'm just kidding. And do so too, and you can just see Haman going, ha, 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 me, ah. And he says, Mordecai, the Jew. Now there's been something going on in this story from the beginning. Any time the king says something, It cannot be changed. If you're Haman, what do you do right now? Right? Oh, man. I mean, has this ever happened to you? Has there ever been a moment you just thought, man, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to get the promotion is for me. Yes. And then all of a sudden, and we'd like to honor. And you're sitting over there going, yeah, that's right. Sue. I trained Sue. What? Has this ever happened to you? Oh, how cool. But no, God's not in control. Right? God's up there going, this is fun, isn't it, Haman? Right? Who sits in the king's gate. Leave out nothing. I love this part. Hey, by the way, when you do this for Mordecai, don't leave anything out, okay, Haman? You had a great idea. Right? Turn the page. So Haman took the robe and the horse, and he dressed Mordecai and led him through the square of the city. This is awesome. Proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Can you just see him? His words, I don't know if he's like, hey, thus deserves this man, like this. Or, okay, so here we have these problems. Have you ever said something but your heart wasn't in it? You know, like the old statement, I think Aaron Berger brought this up to me one day. The little kid, the parent says, you sit down. And the kid's like this, you sit down. Finally you say, you sit down. And the kid sits down like this, and he goes, I may be sitting on the outside, but I'm standing on the inside. Right? Okay, so here's Haman, and he's walking down the way, and he goes, here's what's supposed to be done for whom the king delights. But in his heart, he's thinking, should have been me. Right? Okay. Sorry, I had so much fun with this chapter when I was putting this thing together. I'm like, oh, Haman reminds me of me. All right, but then, so through the square, proclaiming before him, thus shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Next paragraph. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house. Like, can you just see this guy just scooting along? Just as mad as can be. Just mad. Sorry, I got pouting written in my Bible. Mourning and with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all of his friends everything that had happened to him. Now, so for everybody that wasn't here last week, let's go back and watch this. Go back to chapter 5, and I want to show you what Haman was doing last week with his wife and all of his buddies. Haman chapter 5, verse 9. Haman went out that day from the little feast that Esther was putting on, joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him. He was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Verse 10. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Then Haman said, Queen Esther, let no one but me come to the king, and the king come to the feast that she prepared. Tomorrow also I'm invited to have another one with her. Verse 13. Yet all of this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. Then his wife comes up with a great idea. Hey, here's an idea. Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. There's an idea. You don't like him, kill him. And so then chapter 6 happens. And he's walking home pouting and everything. Now we pick it up at the end of chapter 6, verse 12. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all of his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wife and his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. Here's the deal, buckwheat. You wanted to kill him, but now he's equal with the king, so you are in a lot of trouble. You are in a lot of trouble. Lessons that we take from this. I hope you're learning lessons as we go along. Where is God when Haman seems to win? Where is God when he couldn't sleep? He had bad pizza, and so he decided to go to the king's palace. Well, where was God? You know what? Here's the thing. I want you to see this, and don't forget this statement. He is there, and he is not silent. Don't you love the title of this book? Francis Schaeffer in the 70s, he wrote the book. I've never read the book. I love the title. He is there, and he's not silent. Can I promise you something? Whatever is going on in your world, he is there, and he is not silent. He has not abandoned you. He has not left you. He is there, and he is silent. Or he's not silent. He's speaking to you. He's wanting to get you through this because he's providential. He's sovereign. He wants the best for you and for his glory. There's 3 rules that I hope when I die, or let me reverse that. I hope when you die, not soon, but I hope when you die, and you go to heaven, and God says, so you went to that log cabin. Yep. What'd you learn? Well, we learned 3 rules. Rule number 1, God is in control. There really wasn't anything we needed to worry about, was there, God? And God says, nope. Rule number 2, God is in control. If by some chance you forget the first 2 rules, lean heavily on rule number 3. God is in control. If we could just get that, every one of us would sleep better tonight, and the week would look different tomorrow. Amen. God is in control. I'm going to have the fellows come up. We're going to take our offering, and then we're going to be done here in just a few minutes. All right. Glad you came? All right. Turn in your Bibles one more place. The book of Romans. Romans chapter 11. Romans chapter 11. I want to show you, when I started marking my Bible many years ago. By the way, I would highly encourage you, if you have Bibles, mark them up. Get a pen, get a bunch of different colored pens, mark those things up as much as can be. I'm a firm believer that when I see a Bible marked up, tore up, and wore out, it usually belongs to a Christian that's not. So mark them up. When I started marking my Bible, I used a color scheme, and one of the color schemes I used was purple. Purple because of royalty. And so I would mark verses when it had to do with God being in control and God being sovereign and all these other things. And you know, one of the first ones I ever came across was in the book of Romans, chapter 11. Romans chapter 11, verse 33 to the end of 11. It says this: "Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unchangeable are his judgments! How inscrutable his ways! For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Or who has given a gift to him that he might be repaid?" And here's the verse: "For from him, and through him, and to him are all things." You see the all things? "To him be glory forever. Amen." You know what's great about that verse? The same small theme that runs through the book of Esther suggests that every single time the king makes an edict, it can't be changed. I just happen to know the king of the universe. And when he says something, it can't be changed. From him, to him, through him, all things.